Good afternoon, everyone, and happy Earth Day. Today, we are joined for a special TCR dialogue with Presiding Elder Betty Schröder from the 15th Episcopal District from the warm, sunny country of Namibia. Elder Schröder is also one of the youngest, if not the youngest, presiding elder in the Connectional Church. We won't say how young she is, but she and I are of a similar generation. We'll just leave it at that. But Elder Schröder, thank you for being with us today as we celebrate Earth Day and the wonderful gift of God's creation. Welcome to the Christian Recorder Dialogues.
Thank you so much, Brother Thomas III. Thank you so much for having me on this platform and for extending the invitation. Greetings to everyone out there, and a blessed Earth Day to one and all. Thank you.
So here on the Christian Recorder Dialogues, we have tried to bring you AME members perspectives and views from a wide variety of distinguished personalities of people in the church who are doing great ministry and work. And Elder Schröder is not only a presiding elder, she's also a government official in Namibia working in the Ministry of the Environment. So we're going to talk to her today about how this work intersects with her and just understanding more about, what we need to be concerned about, especially today when it comes to environmental concerns, because there's so much going on. So, Elder Schröder, first of all, tell me exactly what are your responsibilities with the Namibian government?
With the Namibian government, I basically serve as a principal project coordinator in the Department of Environmental Affairs. My responsibilities are to look at policy development of environmental laws, negotiating international environmental laws, and most certainly focusing on multilateral environmental agreements, bilateral agreements, and engaging in negotiations on the different Rio conventions, which is basically or predominantly the Convention on Biological Diversity and the Convention on drought and desertification, as well as looking at issues related to sustainable development. So my role within the ministry basically is to manage projects that are funded, environmentally funded, and that need to focus on implementation on national level and responding to an international level with regards to environmental agreements.
So how long have you been in that role with the Namibian government?
I have joined the government in 2009, January. So I've been around for the past 11 years. Is that it? Since 2009. I've been around since 2009.
Okay. So I noticed, and we did a breaking news about this regarding your work in biodiversity, specifically the Nagoya Protocol. So let's delve into, because I know environmental issues there's so many things. There's so many things that we can talk about regarding the environment, but you have a unique emphasis on biodiversity. Tell us about the importance of biodiversity and what are some things that we should all understand about biodiversity?
Okay, this is actually a very exciting topic and a question that really excites me. If I have to start talking about biodiversity, then it reminds me of the very first time when I had to answer and explain to someone what biodiversity means. For this year, the theme for Earth Day is Restore Our Earth, and it basically focuses on natural processes and emerging green technologies that can restore the world's ecosystem. Now, based on your question, what is biodiversity? And I will talk about how I happen to learn what biodiversity is because I'm coming from a total non-environmental and non-conservation background. So biodiversity should be understood as everything that basically supports life on Earth. If we talk about the air that we breathe, the water that we drink, the food we eat, the trees, the grasses, the land, and everything that we basically depend on for our survival. That is what we refer to as biodiversity. And If we do not take care of this, the environment will no longer be able to provide for us and will become degraded. I may also wish to enlighten us by saying that I wish to suggest that as Christians, we have a responsibility to respond, because the responsibility that has been put unto Christianity because of such words as dominion and subdue and multiply that are part of the creation story that we find in Genesis 1, where it says that then God said, let us make humankind in our image according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over the wild animals of the earth. So in line with that, it already explains to us what inculcates biodiversity and how important biodiversity is to us. So I don't know, John, if it is proper for me to say that we actually have a obligation towards our biodiversity, and it is important for our ecosystem. And why am I saying that? I'm saying that because everyone must know that we have a responsibility through the word dominion, for example, which implies caretaking, to act as stewards of God's own purpose, and that we should preserve and not exploit. So biodiversity basically, if I have to put it like this, boosts ecosystem productivity, where each species, for example, no matter how small it is, it all has an important role that it plays. For example, a large number of plant species means a greater variety of crops. And when we, as we are in this time of the COVID-19 pandemic, there's so many examples that one can look at in terms of biodiversity, touching on medicinal plant and how that can be used for pharmaceuticals. But that is something that I may touch on when we get to the issue of the Nagoya Protocol and compliance thereof, because the Nagoya Protocol basically deals with issues of that nature. So I'm not sure if I have given an answer to your question, but that's basically in short what I can share with you. And if I have to add, I may speak around the web of life, and go into more detail, but I'm not sure how much time we have, and it may require that we seek for a different time slot to maybe go into a lot of detail. What I also want to add, with your permission, of course, is that it is the combination of life that forms and the interactions with each other and with the rest of the environment that has made Earth a uniquely habitable place for human beings. So biodiversity basically provides a large number of goods and services in order to make sure that life is sustained.
Wow. I appreciate how you reminded us, and that's one of the reasons why we wanted to bring you on today, was to make that link between the Christian responsibility to care for creation and what it means to care for creation. I just, you put it in an elegant way that I haven't quite heard before in a while. So you alluded to this a little bit, that this wasn't originally where you started out. So how did you get involved in this environmental work? How did you become such a strong advocate for the environment and working for the Namibian government in such an important capacity?
I was so looking forward to this particular question. As I said in the beginning, I am coming from a total non-conservation background. I've never studied environment. I've never studied natural resource management. I've never studied conservation or anything of the likes. That is before I joined the ministry or before I got involved in environmental work. How I got involved into the process is um, it started as a journey in 1999. Prior to 1999, I've been a extremely rebellious, um, very busy child, a teenager, um, part of the world and doing everything in the world. I've been exposed to a lot of alcohol. I've been a drug addict. And eventually in 1999, I got saved. When I got saved, I started to engage myself in voluntary services because at that time, I had my grade 12, which is the high school grade certificate, but I did not pass with good grades, which means that I could not be admitted in any tertiary education. And besides that, my mother who raised us as a single parent has been very sick and she could not afford to send us to school. So I started to get involved in voluntary services through the National Youth Council. I got appointed as chairperson for the regional council. And through that, by God's grace, the Critical Ecosystem Partnership Fund with the MacArthur Foundation and the Global Environmental Facility and Conservation International then rolled out a program where they were looking for young people, unemployed youth who does not have any background in environmental education or whatever, so that they could capacitate and develop these persons into a environmental program. So it has been an environmental program for non-conservationists with the aim to turn them into successful environmentalists. I applied and I was then selected as one of the unemployed youth to be part of this program, and so the journey started. The person, maybe God sent, that had to train us was also a pastor coming from a non-environmental background, and we grew together through this journey. So I was granted the opportunity as a grade 12 unemployed youth to engage in youth development activities and to continue volunteering until through the Karos Regional Council, I was then employed by the Conservation International as an assistant project manager. There I was challenged to develop programs for the Succulent Karoo Ecosystem Program under Conservation International that dealt with the Shpekgebied, which is a biodiversity hotspot in the south. And I had to develop a program that the Namibian government, together with the South African government, through Conservation International, had to focus on biodiversity-related programs, as well as the protection of endangered species, more specifically plants. So now you can think for yourself, John, how how challenging this was. I don't know anything about the environment. I don't even understand what biodiversity means. And I had to have my first appointment with the government to introduce this program, and I could not even explain to them what biodiversity means. So this is how I got involved into this program. It continued under the Conservation International, where I had to commute between Cape Town and Namibia in terms of getting training, in terms of doing programs, as to how I need to understand the environment, how I need to understand plants. But only once you build up considerable experience and in-depth knowledge, you can speak about this topic as I do. I believe there was a divine process in place, because through this process, I then started to educate myself. I started to look for opportunities, how to get tertiary education. I had to be I understand the process of why I had to be a rebellious child, why I had a drug addict, why I had to be a party animal. It was all of the process. And when I repent in 1999, I had a story to tell during this interview, that whatever I went through during that time was preparation for this day in order for me to tell my story. Because no one really understands how I got involved in this environmental work. No one really understands what type of background I have and how I got into the current position that I have and how I got elevated into whatever position I'm occupying now. In the process, I had my feelings hurt. I was embarrassed because those who had the privilege to tertiary education would laugh at me. And when I could not even explain what biodiversity means, that was even more embarrassing. But all of that was preparation. I was determined to work hard. I challenged the status quo and I endured the gossipers, the disgruntled attitudes at my job. All that prepared me for who I am today. So to me, it was private and it was an internal fight, a sense of belonging, but my heart was in it. I had a passion for it. And so I enrolled myself into studying international environmental law. It took me some 2-3 years to complete my undergraduate diploma at the United Nations Institute and Research Center. And after that, I further ventured into project management because I knew, even though I am not, even though I don't have a passion for studying natural environmental science, I knew that I am more passionate about, the policies and the strategies and so forth. So to me, as much as it was a private and internal fight, I knew where I am going. I believe that if God saved me in 1999 and created a program for an unqualified conservationist, then I am favored. And because I experienced and saw the favor that God had on me, I knew that the Holy Ghost overshadowed me and the power of the Holy Ghost empowered me. And with each time, each activity that I engaged in, I ensured that I excel in it and that I do more than what is required of me. So Conservation International moved to actually requested us to develop the program so that it can be accepted and adopted under the Namibian government so that we don't necessarily need to report to South Africa. And so I was then challenged to develop this program, knowing that I don't have any knowledge, knowing that I don't have the capacity, knowing that I don't have the papers for this. But we were challenged to do that. And so I was then trained by someone called Dr. Chris Brown, who is one of the key experts in Namibia, who then trained me and assisted me in order to understand and then up my studies and get involved in what I am today. So from there, I was literally, I wouldn't say poached, but I was approached and I had to apply for another position at the Ministry of Environment. And of course, they recognized my skills. I joined them in 2009. 2009, October, I had to go for my first negotiations in Colombia, where the whole process of the Nagoya Protocol, where I was exposed to that. And I had people like Dr. Sam Shikongo and others who then trained me in understanding my role as a negotiator, my role as someone that need to negotiate on behalf of Africa, because Namibia had to lead negotiations. So in short, what I have to say, it's a long story, but to cut it short, I started with project management at the University of Stellenbosch and then proceeded with international environmental laws. And then studies never ended. I just believe that I need to empower myself and continue studying in order to have what I never had as a child and what I could never have as a child. My mother passed on 3 weeks before I was ordained. So that even added more weight to the process of studying art. So in conclusion, God gave me power for success in my career, and the same in my ministry. My journey was private, it was personal, but I've been prepared for this. The Bible says that I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And yes, I have observed that. I've observed that in what I do, and I know that all things are possible through Christ who strengthens us. I had doubts, I had fears, fought with my fears, my anxieties, my insecurities. I fought with haters, liars, backstabbers, whatever, but I knew that I am called for a purpose. And many times I laid on the bed and I couldn't go to sleep because I was fighting with myself, asking, am I really, really qualified to do all this? But yes, I got the answer. What is impossible with man is possible with God. And I sit here today speaking as an expert, basically expert negotiator that can speak on issues related to biodiversity, desertification, because I do the negotiations for Africa on these different conventions. I can talk on and on about my journey.
I know we only have 40 minutes, and we have some other things we need to get to talk to about. So, but in all seriousness, though, Elder, when we gave you the list of questions, you said that was your favorite question, and I see why. Because you just didn't talk about your environmental work. We can't separate your environmental ministry from your Christian ministry, your Christian witness. And, I am glad that we decided to have you today for that Earth Day testimony. As an aside, two things, Bishop Daniel sends his greetings. He may come on later at some point, but he just wanted to share. He's proud of you, and he sends his greetings. And also, you mentioned your education, but correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't you doing something else involving education with the AME Church coming up soon?
I am currently busy with my Master's in Divinity at I've been accepted at the Penn Theological Seminary. That's one. But I'm currently busy with the same Master's in Divinity from a different perspective at the South African Theological Seminary, SATS. And besides that, I am trying to complete my Master's in Business Administration. So that is what I'm trying to do.
So you are the living embodiment. You are the living embodiment of study approved.
Something like that. Yes. I think that happens more when you want to not prove to yourself that you can do it, but when you recognize what God is able to do, and when you know that you can really achieve more and share your experiences and skills with the world, because God is really able. Yeah.
Amen. So let's delve a little bit more into some of the negotiation responsibilities you've had on behalf of Namibia and the African continent for the environment. So recently, and we sent this announcement out, you were named to chair the compliance committee of the Nagoya Protocol. What exactly does that mean? All these we've heard of the Kyoto Protocol, all these other UN things coming around. Nagoya didn't get as much fame as Kyoto, but I know it exists. So tell us about what that means, being chair of the compliance committee, and what are some of the responsibilities?
What does it mean? In short, it means that I serve as chair for the compliance committee. And the committee is basically responsible to examine the situation where parties fail to submit their national reports under Article 29 of the Nagoya Protocol. Now, you may ask, what is the Nagoya Protocol? The Nagoya Protocol basically is the Nagoya Protocol basically is a protocol or one of the treaties that has been negotiated under the Convention of Biological Diversity, and it basically focused on the third objective of the biological diversity, which is the fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from the utilization of genetic resources. And this is basically a landmark agreement in the international governance of biodiversity, and the relevance for commercial and non-commercial sectors dealing with genetic resources. I've earlier spoken about the COVID-19 pandemic and coronavirus. The Nagoya Protocol basically focuses on areas where people can do research, more so on medicinal plants, and maybe see if there's any cure. So pharmaceutical companies are engaging with different providers. So users and providers need to ensure that there is legal certainty for users and providers of genetic resources in order to ensure that when we engage with each other, that there's prior informed consent, and so forth. So the name Nagoya Protocol basically comes from Nagoya, because the negotiations was concluded in 2010 in Nagoya, and that's where the name comes from. So in terms of the compliance obligations, we're focusing on innovation of the Nagoya Protocol and basically obligation to comply with national ABS legislation and mutually agreed terms. So that is basically the importance of this. Now, we have 15, the compliance committee is basically composed of 15 members that are nominated from parties. If I say parties, then I refer to parties that have either signed or ratified to the Convention of Biological Diversity. And not only that, but under the Nagoya Protocol, parties that have signed or ratified or acceded to the Nagoya Protocol and that has been elected by the Conference of Parties, serving as the meeting of the parties to the Nagoya Protocol, on the basis of 3 members from each of the 5 regional groups of the United Nations. So basically the responsibilities under the compliance committee is that we meet at least twice a year, and then in accordance with cooperative procedures and institutional mechanisms that has been adopted through a particular decision under the negotiations that we had under the Conference of Parties, the committee then receive submissions related to issues of compliance and non-compliance with provisions under the protocol from any party with respect to itself, or it can be any party with respect to another party, or the Conference of Parties and the members of parties. So it has a lot of layers in terms of how one needs to comply and how one looks at issues of non-compliance. But the most important thing is that the rules of procedure of the meeting of the compliance committee under the Nagoya Protocol was adopted at the Conference of Parties and the conference of the members of parties through decisions, and we now need to ensure that there is compliance from countries under Article 29. So yes, that's basically it.
So in a nutshell, for the people who are watching, because I know I know especially for our US viewers, we don't really get to hear much about international law. In some ways, people outside the US are far more knowledgeable of what happens with international law than US people. But our viewers are global. But basically, in a nutshell, you're responsible for making sure that this big international document is complied with and that the countries do what they're saying they're going to do to protect the diversity of our environment, in a nutshell. Wow.
Yes, that's basically what it says. A simple example is if you or your company, for example, or if you want to do research in Namibia, depending on what type of research you want to do, if it's bioprospecting on a particular plant or a particular resource, then there is a certain process that needs to be followed, which is prior informed consent. There must be mutually agreed terms and so forth. So if you have not followed that process, and we pick up through the different checkpoints that are set up that you have not followed the process, obviously, when you want to export any of our material for your research, be it commercial research or non-commercial research, if there's any potential commercial value in whatever research you want to do, and there is potential that you have most probably made use of the traditional knowledge of a particular community in order to see that this plant can, for example, cure cancer, or it can cure HIV/AIDS, or it is a potential cure for the coronavirus, and you do research on that, and you not follow the procedures and the proper processes, and you, for example, export to the US or to the EU, they will send you back if you don't have all the papers for compliance in place. And that is basically what we do in order to see that there is compliance from both users and providers.
Wow, wow. So let's shift gears for a little bit. So you talked about this earlier when you talked about how you came to this role, but how have you blended your ministerial vocation, because you are a minister of the gospel, you're even pastoring a church right now and holding the eldership at the same time, correct? Or are you still pastoring?
Yes.
So how have you blended your ministerial vocation? So I was saying, so you are an active minister, you're a presiding elder. How have you blended your ministerial vocation and your environmental work?
John, I always ask myself the question, and I hear this from many people: how do I juggle around all these things? And I must say that I sometimes don't have an answer for that. But what I do know is that my ministerial vocation and environmental work are closely connected because I have a passion to serve. Within the environmental fraternity, I deal with communities. I deal with looking at the livelihoods of people. I deal with poor communities, and that's more or less the same that I have to do as a minister. So my heart and my passion is really to serve. I believe the church has a very important role to play in the protection of our environment and conserving our biodiversity and access to a wider audience. And I have learned as I grew up that everything we do, not only when I studied and when I understood what biodiversity really means, but I understood through my calling that biodiversity starts with me as a human being. So in fact, this is the responsibility given to us through our biblical requirements, principles, and considered as the foundation for environmental protection by environmental legal authors such as Rupel and all over the world. So I apply fully in my life Genesis 1:26, and I serve as a steward. So if I have agreed to have dominion over fish and sea and over the birds and the heavens, the wildlife and cattle and all this, then it means that as a steward, first of all, I have a responsibility. So I have never disconnected the two from one another. When I recycle a house, when I to reuse anything, it is, energy, climate change, everything is inculcated into what I do as a minister, and I try to teach and do the same wherever I serve. So I never had a challenge, and I think it's because of the connection that there is and that you cannot disconnect that I still enjoy what I'm doing.
So, I mean, you again are a living example of how, we are supposed to be the stewards of God's creation here on this planet, and how that's deeply embedded in your ministry. You can't separate the two. Wow. So, you talked about this earlier about, again, advocating on behalf of Namibia as well as the African continent in general in these biodiversity negotiations and in environmental negotiations at large. What are some of the key concerns for Namibia and other developing countries with regards to biodiversity?
Quite an interesting question. Key concerns regarding Namibian developing countries in general with regards to biodiversity, I would say that biological diversity is of immense importance to the Namibian people, first of all, and most importantly to the Namibian economy. Around 70% of Namibia's population depends directly on the natural resource base for their income, for food and medicinal needs, as well as for fuel and shelter. Basically, our livelihoods is dependent on biodiversity. So our natural resource-based sectors, such as mining, such as agriculture, fisheries, and tourism, also form the backbone of our economy. So, in terms of biodiversity, we as the Namibian, basically, we must ensure that our biological resources, our wildlife, our forests and plants, our fish and our marine, our minerals are not overexploited and over harvested. We therefore need to ensure that our development becomes more greener use of renewable energy, for example. We need to look at green jobs because a lot of people have lost jobs, particularly during COVID. We need to look at efficient use of water and electricity, recycling and reduction of waste. So I would say that these kinds of interventions will ensure that development has a lesser impact on the environment and biodiversity, and also to ensure sustainable use for the future generations. Lastly, in response to your question, communities need to benefit fairly from the use of biodiversity. If this happens, I believe, John, that it will encourage and incentivize them to care for and preserve various aspects. The fauna and the flora are basically the pride of all Namibians, and their beauty is appreciated throughout the world. So they attract domestic and international tourists because of their beauty. So if we look at developing countries, it is the developing countries has the natural resources, but the way in which we manage it and the way how we allow it to be either accessed or overexploited is the challenge that we are basically faced with. So economic development, in my opinion, is a key requirement in Namibia and for the rest of the developing countries and most other developed countries and small islands and states, for example, so that the living standards of our people are are basically improved. And the question maybe would be how do we balance economic development with environmental protection, which is basically supposed to be the key concern for any of these countries. Because if we go through it and if we look through it, developing countries are rich in their biodiversity, particularly in Africa. Mm-hmm. But how we manage it is the key challenge that we are faced with.
Wow. Because I know we hear a lot about, how certain things are happening, particularly with, and this is not the day to talk about investment, strip mining and Chinese investment and certain types of investment that aren't exactly, this is not the day for that. But definitely, we know how rich the continent of Africa is in resources. And also, like you said, it's a management issue. We have to manage them in a way that they'll be around for a long, long time. So again, shifting up a little bit, you're a presiding elder in Namibia. Again, you are an elder not only in Namibia, you're an elder in Windhoek, which is the capital. So tell us about some of the challenges that have faced the AME Church there during the pandemic, and how has it been in Namibia?
Tough question, but most probably also something that really need to be responded to. Some of the challenges that we have faced as a church during the pandemic, first of all, I need to recognize that in the beginning of the pandemic, there was no predicting what the future would hold. It had been over a number of days and months since we've been in this globally declared pandemic, and it came as a unexpected dilemma to not only the church but to the entire human race. So daily life looks different than ever before. And as human beings, we are seldomly challenged with, change, with that paradigm shift in terms of how to move forward from here. What is it exactly that you're going to do? So it has been one of the key challenges was change. Were we ready for the change, and were we ready to make that change? Going to virtual platforms, responding to what the true essence of missionary work and the mission of the church: clothe the naked, feed the hunger, house the homeless, and all those are. So we were basically challenged to revisit, what I would call revisit, the entire system. And I think for many of us, it has been both as challenging as it has been an experience to revisit, first of all, the class system. How do we respond to this? How do we implement this? Because, whether we like it or not, we have got into a level where, as ministers, we have our own rules, we have our own way of doing things. And when the discipline suits us, we apply it. And when it does not suit us, we operate outside of it, forgetting that we need to work on circumstances or try to address things in circumstances. And even now, in the time of the pandemic, we are challenged with the fact that some of us as ministers, we still want to stay strict to the discipline and not try to be accommodative of the circumstances in which we are. So first of all, our members, we had a loss in membership. So some of our members, because the church were closed, a decision that was taken on a higher level by our councils of bishop, we had to implement it on all different levels throughout the connection. So that was the first thing. In Namibia, other churches were not closed. They were closed the first time with the complete lockdown of all businesses and institutions, but then after that, churches were open. So in terms of members who left without certificate and members who left with certificate, or members who simply just don't want to be part of us because our church doors were closed, we had a challenge in a drop of membership. But I wouldn't want to say that Corona is the reason for us dropping membership, because membership in the AME Church is a recycling thing. I have not seen any particular growth, even though there's growth. At some places, it is recycled membership, which is one of the key challenges that we need to focus on. Corona just made it worse. That's the first one. The second one is that it may seem to be a challenge, but I did not see it as a challenge, because this basically came as an opportunity where we had to broaden the scope of our evangelism programs, nurturing disciples and making sure that through our social action commissions, we can go out and we can start forming partnerships in order to see how best we can get to our members in rural areas, because now you have to figure out and find different ways as to how you can serve your community. So through this season, though this season has created an intense reset within the Christian community, it has been made clear that it is not always bad. It enabled us to really serve in the true sense of being servants. And I think that it has forced us to think back to what we are about. We are about making disciples. We're about glorifying God and what is essential, and make sure that happens. And sometimes people find themselves taking a step back from the seemingly dull moments to evaluate the motions the years have delivered on them. And for us during this time of the pandemic, it had that challenge. The biggest challenge that we faced in Namibia, through this pandemic, is that as ministers, we grew apart, and that's just reality, and something that we need to check and work on. Where in other parts of our connection or the district, the pandemic has brought people together. So in some parts of our ministry, some of us as ministers have grown apart because of fear of picking up the virus, fear of things, fear of not understanding what our key role would be, rural pastors, suffering, no income, and that feeling of this church should be responsible. But personally, my belief is that even though we believe that the church must be responsible, I saw this, that the world is crumbling and calling for a new definition of ourselves. And the world has introduced a new norm to society. So if the world evolves and revolves in a cycle manner from periods of chaos to periods of change, to periods of adjustment, to periods of balance, and periods where we need to rebuild, rearrange, and reconstruct, then we need to do that inward look and find ways how we can move past this and try to find innovative ways. So if I have to look at what my district have done, then I can really applaud the pastors within in the Windhoek district, because they've become so innovative. I thought I'm busy and I'm active, but they have really surpassed my energy levels, and I could not keep up with them. So they've basically collectively made it their duty to evaluate, to express, to educate, to find ways how we could economize, to encourage, to empower, to embrace, evangelize, and look for ways how we can expand of God's kingdom. So the COVID-19 pandemic could not stop us from any of our duties as much as we had a challenge for it. So building together, and we know in Christ we are victorious. So the best thing that could happen is that for many of us, we could live and relive and understand the importance of networking through the connection where we were disconnected as a church. We learned that there is an opportunity for connection. It wasn't perfect on a local or on a conference level, but on a connectional level, we really got that exposure, and we praise God for that.
Wow. 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 I think, we take it for granted. Again, I'm sitting here in the US, but realizing that we as the AME Church are in 40 different countries with 40 different experiences of how the pandemic has impacted us. In some countries, it was the vaccines, the lockdowns were handled in a much more orderly and efficient way than they were in the United States. Some of the advice we gave here, although we said follow your local rules, sometimes didn't quite translate out. But hearing again, just the class leader system, and this whole thing about connection, disconnection, let's really think about connection in new ways. And it's heartening to hear you say that you felt connected to the connectional church, even if some things were working locally, you at least felt that the AME church was still there. That's important for us to know and to realize that the connection still works. Moving on, because we're almost up with our hour, but yesterday the General Conference Commission met, and we hopefully will be hearing the final recommendations for the 2021 General Conference over the next few days. So, Elder, what are your thoughts and hopes for the 2021 General Conference?
I was looking at this question. I was asking myself, how authentic would I be in answering this question? What would the proper answer be? But before I say anything, the first thing that comes to my mind is that AMEs will rise above the challenges caused by the pandemic, and in a united fashion, most probably pave the way ahead for the next 4 years. For me, as a person, if I look at districts 14 through 20 and how the GDC objectives can be met, then I think this is the time for us as a church to step up and do justice to the system. If I say do justice to the system, then one, look at the operationalities and you look at where the church is going and you look at what the church offers. We have a very good system in place. We have the guiding document, which is the Book of Discipline and Doctrine. We are looking at how best we can implement the 25 articles of religion. But the question that we're sitting with, or that I'm particularly sitting with, if I look at this question, is my hope for the 2021 General Conference is that there will be fairness, there will be justice, there will be. How are we going to roll out the entire General Conference without being exclusive or without treating districts districts in this side of the continent different than the overseas districts? How are we going to make sure that we respond to what we have signed up for as AMEs when we look at the history of why Richard Allen walked out of the Methodist Church, if we look at issues of racism, if we look at issues of discrimination, how best are we going to address? I know there's the legislations and so forth that need to be revised and that need to be looked at, but my question is, in terms of the history of the AME Church and in terms of where we are today, how are we going to respond to the cry of the people in the GDC districts? How are we going to make sure that when we elect bishops, when we elect leadership for the general board and for any other position, how are we going to ensure? So I'm curiously sitting here and observing how leadership will ensure that there is fairness and there is justice in the system, more particularly when we most probably have to engage virtually. We don't know yet, but how best are we going to ensure that we get the results that we want to get? I've read some articles, about concerns of some of our people, some of our candidates, where they basically asking, are we going to follow the laws and the procedures and processes of the church without manipulating it, without treating those ones from districts 14 through 20 as if we are secondary citizens? Are we going to treat them fairly? So we're sitting with those questions and we basically say our hopes for the 2021 General Conference is that for the first time in history, there most probably should be that we will elect a visionary leadership that will join current leadership in taking us to the next level. Something about the lessons that we've learned over the years. I've read on some of the discussions that people talk about. We need to meet in 2024 in order to discuss where we have messed up and how we can correct that. If we don't correct it now, and if we could not correct it in the past, how are we going to assess it and correct it in the future? I have seen the strategic plan that we have developed as a church in 2009, and basically there's so many proposals in that, but do we outroll it? Do we implement it? So I think the overall governance system is something that we really need to look at and to ensure that there is inclusivity and that we cultivate the spirit of Ubuntu, that we cultivate the spirit of unity, and that we cultivate the spirit where we as Africans not only look at what we can contribute to the system, but that we can look at how can we do it in a unified manner. As much as we want to say that the connection is not supporting us, and this is my personal view, I do believe that as Africans, we engage ourselves seldomly and most of the times in the divide and rule game, where we look at our individual agendas instead of looking at the connection or the continent as a whole. And that is basically one of the biggest challenges that we are facing. So, John, I wouldn't want to go into this topic. This topic can become very sensitive, and I wouldn't want to be too outspoken on certain aspects. But I do believe that as a church, we need to revisit our history, look at what we really meant when we speak about the connection and how we treat each other as brothers and sisters in order to achieve the overall mission of the church.
Well, that definitely is a discussion that needs to be held. And as you've seen some of my writings on the matter, and I have my own thoughts on where we are as a connection, and more importantly, where we're not as a connection. But thank you for sharing that and being honest and telling us your truth regarding that. And again, that's a discussion that needs to be held and held at the highest levels. I do want to say that Bishop Daniels tried to get on, and he was here for a second, and we'll try to get him back at the end to say a few words, but he may come back. But let's go to the final question that we have, bringing it back to the beginning, bringing it back to Earth Day. So, what are some of the ways that the AME Church can be more proactive and can be a better advocate for the environment and environmental justice issues?
Okay, the first thing that I would say is Mother Earth was created by God, replete with flourishing flora and fauna. We need to incorporate biodiversity, environmental issues into. I'm not sure if we really preach about this, if we really teach about this. We need to promote responsible environmental behavior among our congregants. I have looked at what the church has done in the past, and I have learned that where we state and say that the world cannot afford to silence us, and as Black church leaders, we need to address issues not only related to climate change, but we need to address issues related to floods. We need to address issues related to drought. We need to get involved and engage in this type of issues. We need to make sure that I've seen that the church has a very good program currently in place that focuses on climate change, and a resolution was passed at the General Conference in Philadelphia, where we gathered, where we then resolved that we're going to engage ourselves in climate change and make sure that the damage to our climate puts the health of our children and our elderly at stake, and we're going to respond to this. I've seen some programs running on that, but biodiversity or environment is not only about climate change. The church is already doing some stuff through its social actions commission. There's a lot that is already happening through that. But what I would want to encourage us as a church is basically for us to look at how best can we get involved. How best can we get involved in these conventions that deals with issues that affect us? The Convention on Drought and Desertification. We had floods in the Caribbean islands. We had floods in, if I'm not mistaken, the 4th district. We had floods all over, and we're trying as a church to fight these on our own instead of connecting to different institutions and different organizations that can basically assist us in addressing these issues. The most important thing that I would put forward and say is we need to have a particular environmental strategic plan in the church so that we can then operate and focus on the different key areas. The WMS is focusing on issues related to sustainable development through some of their commissions. So if we look at the global biodiversity outlook, then we will see that there's a number of elements that is identified under the Sustainable Development Goals that we as a church can be party to as an institution, and we can make our contributions. I've seen that recently we came up with a program that focuses on food security. We are able and capable to do this, so we just need to first of all, develop a strategic plan or an environmental management plan for the church so that through our social action commission, through our health commission that would focus on medicinal plants and pharmaceutical issues. All these commissions together, the welfare commission, we can look collectively at a strategic plan that will enable us to work on sustainable food systems, that can work on sustainable agriculture, that will assist us to work on climate change issues, One Health, and definitely our overall responsibility that has been placed on us through the word, where we have to take dominion over Earth. So for me, in short, that is basically it. I would love to contribute to a discussion and a development of a paper in what we already have, and maybe see how we can enhance and let the church be more actively involved, particularly sign and be an associate to the Convention of Biological Diversity, Climate Change, and all others. There are churches who are affiliated, like the Catholic Church, for example, affiliated to some of these conventions, and they do voice their concerns, they give their contributions, and they do benefit through the programs where funding is available. And I believe that the AME Church, as one of the leading Black churches, can certainly have a very good program in place, and have a resolution so that we can address issues and serve the needs of our communities.
Wow, I did.
Also,
Oh, go on.
I
Yes,
give
go ahead.
credit to allow me to give credit to your team, Dr. Garland Pierce, who ensured that when the focus was the theme some 2 years back was on environmental justice, that we could address issues in terms of environmental justice and what we can do as a church. But I really think more that can be done.
Wow, I did not realize that the churches have signed on to these protocols, and I think that is something that definitely going forward, our denomination needs to be seized with. And don't be surprised if somebody calls you from the ecumenical office or from the Social Action Commission for more information. Well, I thank you, Elder Schröder. I see our other guest has come in. The Right Reverend David Daniels, the 123rd elected and consecrated Bishop of the AME Church, is here. And Bishop, please say a few words for our distinguished guest before we wrap up.
I'm excited and delighted to be with you, Garland and Reverend Dr. Garland Pierce and Dr. John Thomas. John don't want to be called doctor, but John has finished his dissertation, and I think the graduation is, if it haven't taken place, it will soon be taking place. I'm the 124th.
124. I'm sorry, 124.
Yeah, I don't want to make. I want to make sure that the 123rd, which is the Right Reverend
Bishop Davis.
Bishop Davis. Yes. That's why I just want to set that record straight. But I am delighted and excited to be a part of this. It's been a busy day. I've been up since 4:30. I'm headed to another meeting, but I promised Dr. Thomas, John Thomas, that I was going to be here, especially when one of my productive presiding elder will be featured. The Reverend Dr. Betty K. Schröder is a phenomenal young lady, extraordinary young lady, very serious. She's an academician in terms of her love and passion for education and knowledge, and we as a 15 Episcopal District, we are very, very proud of her. Mother also wanted me to express that she's in a meeting, and so I wanted to run down here in Mother's library and participated in this what I call the informative educational discussion that is really germane on this day, Earth Day. And I think every day should be Earth Day. God created this world for us, and He placed us here so that we can we can fulfill our creative purpose for which we are here. One of the things I'm reading a book that talks about work, that there's no retirement plan. God retirement plan is a human thing, and we can finish our work in an organization, but we should never stop working. God never stops working. God rested. He didn't retire. He rested, so that we need to get rest. We need proper rest so that God can use us to what I call to perform our creative purpose, to enhance our potential so that we can be productive, so that everything God deposited in us can be used before we leave this place. Why am I saying that? God sent us here to leave this place better than we find it. And when you look at what Dr. John Thomas had been doing, and the Reverend Dr. Garland Pierce, and Betty, Dr. Betty Schröder, the kind of work she's doing, planting new churches, her involvement in the government or community. I am super proud to be a part of this. God bless you all.
Your Grace, thank you for being with us today in your busy schedule, and we acknowledge your presence. So thank you, Bishop number 124, resident Bishop of the 15th District. God bless you for being with us, and thank you for, again, saying good words on behalf of our special guest today, our historic special guest. God bless you, Bishop. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and with your permission, I will exit for my next meeting.
Yes, sir, Bishop. We're wrapping up here.
And thank you for, you couldn't have picked another what I call extraordinary person for this guest to feature her work, her commitment, her passion, her dedication, her devotion to God is incredible. It's phenomenal. She's a phenomenal young lady. Spirit-filled, love the Lord, and love God first, but love African Methodism. She represents us where in the Namibia Anglican, from where she is. Because of her productivity, I appointed her as an administrative assistant to the bishop in Namibia. She was the second female presiding elder God led me to make. The first was Reverend Maria Caperi, and the third one is Anita Hunger, and all of them are unbelievably gifted. I didn't appoint them because they were female. I appointed them because they were fresh, spiritual, productive, visionary, and incredibly committed to what we're doing to build our community and our Zion, the African Methodist Episcopal Church, for our respective countries and for the world and for the connection. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bishop, for being with us today. We know you have to run, so thank you for taking a few moments to be with us.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Elder Schröder, thank you for blessing us. We're out of our time today. We've hit our hour and a little bit more, and you've given us several key things that we're going to have to come back to. Definitely, regarding the environment, regarding the church, and just I wanted to give you a chance for any final words before we go to our announcements.
I would just like to thank you for granting me this opportunity on behalf of the 15th Episcopal District, as well as the church, as a connection to really make it possible so that we could have something to say on Earth Day and express ourselves. What I can say in conclusion is progress is impossible without change, and those who cannot change their minds cannot change anything. So this is the time for us to make a change in terms of the earth, because the earth is what we all have in common. May God bless you. May God bless your program. May God bless this church. And may He grant us the wisdom as stewards to serve not only the people on this planet, but also ensure that we preserve and save our biodiversity from any loss. God bless you. God bless your family, and may He enlarge your territory in the work that you're doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Elder. Amen. Amen. So now for our announcements as we move to our conclusion. So we have two special events coming up. Our next dialogue will be on April 29th, when we will be joined by the United States Chamber of Commerce Vice President, Randy Wade and Antoine C. Wright. And I'm looking for that flyer to come up from production. There we go. That is our next regular dialogue, will be on next Thursday at 1 p.m. However, for those of you all still tuned in, we will be having a special screening, a special event coming up this Sunday with the Right Reverend Vashti Murphy McKenzie and Dr. Mark Tyler, where we will be screening the Spirit of African Methodism documentary. This is a 20-minute documentary produced by the AME Church about the Spirit of African Methodism, featuring voices of bishops, voices of lay leaders, voices of clergy. You do not want to miss this special event where we share this documentary with you. No one can tell our story like the AME Church. Again, this Sunday, back here at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, we remind you to please support the Christian Recorder. We're still in the middle of the pandemic, and we still appreciate your appreciation and your support for allowing us to give you this great content. The subscription rates are still $36 a year, and you can visit us for more information at thechristianrecorder.com. Also, we encourage you to support the AME Publishing House for your church, school, and worship needs. Earlier this week, our publisher, Roderick Beelan, shared a video tour of the Sunday School Union. It is slated to be completed in September, but the edifice is about 70% done. The walls are up. You can see inside, and you can see the publisher literally walking through the walls. So if you want to see that tour, you can go to our YouTube or go to the Facebook page to see the video tour. It's about 20 minutes. As always, we tell you that we have been working through this pandemic with support of our generous supporters who've enabled us to give you this content. Today's sponsors are Ida Heights Hill for Judicial Council and John Foster for Bishop from the 6th Episcopal District. And we also want to acknowledge the candidate from the 50th Episcopal District who also gave a sponsorship today, the Reverend, the Presiding Elder, Wilhelm Berger from Cape Town. Ms. Elder Schröder, thanks for being with us here today. We look forward to having you again. And again, as we remember, the earth is the Lord and the fullness thereof. Until next time, God bless you all. Take care.
God bless you. Thank you.